Happy hump day, everyone. It's Donnie from Eterneva. Thank you for joining us again for our IG live sessions, which we've been running for 3 weeks now. Today we have an amazing guest that we'll welcome on in just a second. Her name is Rachel, and she runs an amazing grief community, an Instagram account called That Good Grief. So we will be bringing her on right now, asking her some questions, and hopefully giving you guys some amazing information and resources to, jump off of in this time. So let's give her a warm welcome as I let her on. Giving her a second. Seems to be connecting.
Hello. Hi.
Happy Wednesday. How are you?
We made it halfway through the week.
We did.
Such great news for everyone, including myself.
I know, right? It feels good, and this is like a nice moment for me to breathe even on the work day. So thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
For everyone that's joining in, because we have a lot of people coming in right now, this is Rachel. She runs That Good Grief, which is an amazing grief community here in Instagram. Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your account and how all of this started?
Yeah, absolutely. So my story in short, quick form would be in the last 3.5 years of my life, my dad passed away from glioblastoma, which is a terminal form of brain cancer. About 14 months later, my mom passed away from the same thing. In that time, also, my brother struggles with addiction. He's been clean and sober now for 18 months, which is amazing. But in that experience, there was a lot of I was going to a grief retreat, or I was reading grief books, or I was going to therapy, but there was so much kind of locked up in an individual day that felt like it didn't get the attention kind of it deserved, of these little moments of grief and loss and mourning that we experience as people. And so I started my account as a way to kind of document, but also process for myself, like those moments in time.
Yeah. And it's been, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's an amazing and engaging community with very helpful tips. I've noticed a lot on your account too. You use the hashtag A Day in the Life of Grief, which is also what I chose to name this session. I'm just curious, what does a day in the life of grief look like for you? And a follow-up to that, while I can, how has that kind of differed before quarantine and now?
Oh boy, yeah. So I think the one thing that hasn't changed is every day is different. I think it goes, it comes and goes in waves, and there's no kind of predicting what a day is going to entail. And I think what someone who's experienced grief comes to appreciate when they've experienced significant loss is that in a day you can have the highest highs and the lowest lows, and like every moment in and of itself is pretty like bittersweet, right? So it has both that bitterness and that sweetness to it, of like it can be a happy moment, but some piece of it's missing because you're not able to share it with the one you love. And so I think for me, the point is like a day in the life of grief is like the whole experience of grief can happen within a day too. And so I think, it's helped me again, like talk about those little things that happen rather than thinking like, oh, in therapy, you're not going to talk about how like you saw two parents like walking with their kid and you were like jealous, right? And like felt that pang of like sadness and grief. And so you're talking more about these like life-changing things that have happened. And so for me, it's just about finding those moments within a day. And in quarantine, it's interesting. I think when it first, it parallels grief and loss in a lot of different ways. And I know a lot of people, I feel like in the world right now, are experiencing some of the things that those of us who are grieving have known all along, and living in a time of like organized chaos, of uncertainty, of a lack of control. And so I think ultimately what I have discovered is that at first it was really easy to discount this experience as something I'd been through before, right? Of like, I've got this handled. Like, I know how to deal with chaos. I know how to deal with uncertainty. I know how to deal with the unexpected. I know how to deal with when things are completely out of my control. And yet that doesn't not wear on me because I know how to do all of those things. And so I think for me, it's in a very similar way to grief generally. It's like it comes and goes in waves of like, it is what it is. What can I do? To a place of like, oh crap, like what am I doing? and feeling those pangs of grief even more strongly than before. The one thing I think that I found kind of surprising was early on, I didn't really necessarily associate the loss of my parents with the quarantine experience. That was something personal to me. And I felt like because this is such an unprecedented, unparalleled experience, I had nothing to like pull on. Like so much of the time that I miss my parents, it's because I'm in a situation where I would love nothing more than to talk to them about it, tell them about it, experience something with them. And we certainly never went through something like this before together. And so it's hard for me to even like pull on those strings rather than just general grief and loss.
Yeah. I mean, that was amazing because I've been following you for a while, and I like hearing that, and especially the way you just described it. It makes it so real, but also like helps I think us and like everyone here, I guess, acknowledge some of these emotions. Like grief really can, all of it can really exist in a day. Like the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs, little moments, doing the dishes, big things, therapy. Like you really just like grasped it for me. I think that's such a good analogy. So thank you for that, and I think helpful for them too. You're getting love up the wazoo, just so you know.
Thank you for the love.
Yeah. But like something else, that I've seen you talk about. You talk a lot about like emotions and welcoming emotions in a lot of your work too. And I can tell from the experiences that you've gone through that grief does teach you some important lessons in life. So I guess out of all of this experience, like what are some of the bigger lessons that you've learned from all this? Oh, everyone give it just a second, just so you know. Bandwidth is a wild thing here on Instagram, so we're kind of going with the flow. Rachel, did you hear the last questions? I know things may have cut out a little bit. I think we have a lot of people joining in right now, so it's slowing down our live. Okay, awesome. Cool.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting to ask a question about what the experience of grief taught me in a time like this. Like I said, is like there's so much now that I feel like people are learning what grief is and feels like through no choice of their own, again, through this kind of quarantine experience of feeling isolated from the people around us, disconnected, from thinking about like what we lost to what we wanted to have happen during this time. And it's really hard to just kind of let any of that go without feeling some sort of loss. And that's a very valid feeling that I want to just like put out there, normalize for people. Like that is a legitimate feeling. It can be something as small as like because you were supposed to, take a trip with a friend one weekend to like my wedding got canceled and postponed or whatever it may be because of it. All of it's completely valid. And I think again, like the biggest lesson grief taught me was like we're not in control. There's things you're in control of, but the extent that you are in control of is limited to your own physical body. Like that is it. There is no limit like past my physical being that I am in control of. And even sometimes we can find that even our bodies, we're not in control of those either. And that can be really hard in a time of grief as well. But in your own head, your own thinking, your own motivation, all of that is all that you have control over as an individual.
I love that. Like that, like a loss of control, like that definitely describes grief in general. It can also describe this quarantine situation for a lot of people. And I think you've already mentioned like a few ways, that you can feel a little bit more control or, like calm those feelings down. Have other methods and things like that helped you like feel more in control in a moment, especially when like the emotion is at its most overwhelming?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things that I tend to turn to, and I would say these are unprecedented times, so we invent new things in times like this.
Yeah.
For me, it's something as small as like getting enough sleep. Like for me, that is absolutely
So
essential, a non-negotiable thing. I wish that I've always been jealous of the people who are like, I can get 4 hours of sleep and then like function perfectly. And I'm like, well, I would be a literal disaster and not get a single thing done. So for me, it's always just like, that's what I have to do, and I can't fight it because it's truly like my biology at this point. I think the other things that, it's just creating space, and then also like allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. I think the longer you fight a feeling, the more overwhelming it's going to become to try and suppress it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just kind of finding the space and the time to let that feeling kind of pass through, whether it's good or bad, right? I always try to think about like leaning into the good and leaning into the bad because both are equally fleeting.
Yeah.
And as soon as you let them kind of pass through.
I think it's definitely resonating people here. Shelly said, I feel like a lesson I've learned is not to hold it in. Like, if you need to cry, just cry.
Yes.
Yes, everyone, crying is so good for you. Like, just literally so, that I agree with that so hard. I see sleep and good food.
Sleep
The
and good
sleep
food.
is
Yeah, I'm
so
into that.
real.
I'm
Yeah,
into
like,
that.
especially now, I know there's so much like in general anxiety in the air, and like, not just me, but so many people are having sleep problems right now. So if you
Yep.
can, you guys, try to get good sleep. I know it's tough though.
Yeah.
I've definitely been part of that
Easier
problem.
said than done for sure,
Yeah.
but like also trying to not judge myself if it's a Sunday and I'm like, I could really use a nap right now and be like, well, I'm 30 years old. I'm an adult. Do I really need a nap right now? And then be like, yeah, I do.
Yes,
And
yes,
then
we
just
all need
taking the nap.
naps.
Take the nap. I
Yeah.
believe in that would be my like presidential platform would be just take the nap.
That's gonna be our next like post. It's just like what tips do you have? It's like take a
Like
nap right now, wherever you are, take a nap.
just like
I love
kindergarten.
it. Definitely been amazing. Like it's so clear that you run a grief community. There's so many just like good advice and tips that we've gotten through this. Just even from a more personal standpoint, what's been the most rewarding thing for you about running a grief community, especially as active as the one that you're a part of?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting for me. I will admit like the intention initially was pretty selfish. Was like I have these daily feelings. I need somewhere to process them and talk about it. And so like I'm going to create this thing just so I can like say it and put my words out there and then kind of walk away. And so it's interesting to be here now, I guess, it's a year and a half later, and realize that it's like it's very much a two-way street. And if anything, I'm getting more from it than I'm giving to it at all. And I think that's because the best thing to discover about grief is that it is the community that surrounds it, and that so many other people know the experience, know the feelings, have been there before, and can relate to you on a level that you otherwise would have had no access to. And so, um, for me, it's just been super rewarding to see people who have similar stories when you think you're the only person in the world who's experienced something, but also being able to connect with people on a human level, like at a global scale, and share resources and share moments and feel community around it.
I love that. Like, what have been some of the most like inspiring stories or maybe lessons that you've learned from others? Because I totally agree with you. Like, especially even with social media, like managing it is such a two-way street. Like, I'd like to think I'm providing value, but I'm definitely receiving value in return, especially when you have like an active community. Is there some kind of like lessons or anything that's like popped up over the years that like have really stuck with you?
I think it's funny. So before I started my account, I did not do any research about what was already out there. And I think part of that was actually a really good thing because if I had seen how much great content around grief and loss and the community that surrounds it existed already, I think I would have been scared out of creating anything at all. But I think what I found is that there's still value to be added in just being able to like kind of bring it full circle for people, and even being an account that uses a lot of other people's artwork and resources, and obviously giving them tons of credit for that, but adding value that way of just being almost like I I work in the media world, so to me it's like there's the way people read information now is aggregated, right? They're going on Twitter, they're reading a newsletter, everything's a recap and a summary of the information they're getting. And so in the same way, this page can serve as like the aggregator of grief content from across the channel.
Yeah.
And I think that that's super valuable and seems to resonate. So
Yes,
just happy to be able to say like without creating content, there's still value to add and your words matter, and it can really help people in their time of need.
100%. And like what I see of what you're doing is you are linking communities. I think that's what's so powerful here is that a lot of these feelings and the things that we talk about can feel isolating, but what you're able to do is like show them that there's this whole world like kind of out there already that they can tap into. And I like even from a curation standpoint, I think that's a skill within itself. We have so much information out there,
There's so
so
much. Yeah. No,
still
but it's,
applaud it.
what still
Yeah.
surprises me though is the number of messages I get from someone who says, this is my first you know, first encounter they've ever had with any sort of grief materials.
Yeah.
Not on our own.
I love it. And then I guess on that note, like like the information that you've given, even your personal stories have been just like amazing to hear. So thank you so much for sharing that too. Um, if we wanted to recommend any other additional resources to the audience today, by the way, everyone, if you didn't know, this is Rachel at That Good Grief. She runs an amazing grief community here on Instagram, so definitely go give her a follow. But if you do have any other resources, whether it is like therapy or online or blog, anything like that, what would you recommend people go look at right now to help them?
Yeah, so my favorite book for all beginners, intermediate and expert level grief people, and friends of people who are grieving who want to have access. It's certainly Modern Loss by Rebecca Soffer and Gabrielle Berkner. It's made up of different kind of vignettes of different people's stories, different experiences with loss and grief from the full spectrum. Someone who's specialized in grief, because that first year or so after that experience was definitely loaded with like just mourning the loss that we were experiencing and not what it meant for everything else in my life. And I think now with some distance, I've evolved to get closer to that. And I think that also DM me your email address because I maintain a full list of resources with tons of books, quotes, Instagram to follow, stuff like that, because it's hard for me to name more than that without saying I need to tell you every single book I've read because they're all incredibly helpful for different reasons.
Yes. I will definitely reiterate Modern Loss by Rebecca Sofair is amazing.
Yeah. So
also, another great resource is Modern Loss, and there's a few like that. But just so everyone knows, this is all going to be recapped. We're going to have a blog post, and we're definitely going to link back to all of this. So thank you so much for taking the time to go live with us today and just like bringing enormous value and just light in general. I don't know how you feel, but like Hump Day is a lot better now.
So yeah, weird energy. It's a weird energy these days.
Yeah. Everyone on the other end, breathe in, shake it off, give Rachel a million likes because this has been amazing.
Thank you,
and
Danny.
thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to have you again soon. But
yeah.
Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe and healthy.
Yes.
Please.